Autocar invented the road test almost 100 years ago. We are the oldest surviving automotive media brand in the world, at 130 years old exactly this year. And in that time, we've road tested nearly 6,000 cars. When I say road tested, I mean we've measured them, we've weighed them, we've done performance figures on them, all the important stuff. And we've tested some really fast cars like a McLaren P1, McLaren F1, Bugatti Veyron Super Sport, Lamborghinis from the Countach to the Revuelto. A couple of years ago, the Ferrari SF90 set new benchmarks for 0 to 60 and 0 to 100 miles an hour in our tests, but nothing, and I mean nothing, has gone as fast as this. It's the Lotus Evija. We are going to tell you and show you how fast the Lotus Evija is. But first, let me tell you what makes this car tick. Wonderfully helpfully, and I adore things like this, we've got this cutaway of the Evija, which shows you the fact that it has this carbon fibre monocoque passenger cell. That also basically encompasses the suspension mounts front and rear. This whole thing, the monocoque, the carbon fibre tub, weighs 120 kilograms. It's made by CPC, which is in Modena. They ship it over. Most of the body panels are then taken off. Most of them are painted by hand because of the way people order this car. They go a bit funky with it, but it could go through the robot paint shop if it wanted to. I can show you, just down in there, I don't know if you can see, there are 2 electric motors at the front. There are 2 electric motors at the rear. Each wheel gets one of its own. Each one makes just over 500 horsepower. So in total, this car has 213 brake horsepower, which is off the scale wild. I'll come on to power to weight ratio and stuff in a moment. But first, you can see there is double wishbone each side with push rods. These Multimatic dampers, they don't do like Ferraris do, they don't do the roll control thing, so there is an anti-roll bar at the front. There's like a twisting torsion bar at the back which acts as anti-roll. This is actually a relatively straightforward car to explain, mad to think, given the performance and everything else, but if you sort of talk through some hypercars and you're talking about the way power is taken from this motor and driven back into the battery, and from this motor attached to this engine and these turbos and blah, blah, blah. There's none of that. This doesn't do any regeneration. The motors make it go forwards in a very quick fashion. The big brakes, carbon ceramics, stop it, and there's no regen. So it's actually a very honest sort of car, if that makes sense. The 91 kilowatt hour battery sits here, right behind the passenger cell, where a traditional engine would be. So from that point of view, it feels like, it can be made to feel like, it handles like it's a car with an engine in its middle, frankly, which is also quite a straightforward thing. Most Lotuses are not four-wheel drive, of course, but you can't have 2,000 plus horsepower without it. Bear in mind, this car has over 1,000 brake horsepower per tonne. I think it's 1,050 brake horsepower per tonne, because it weighs, on our scales, we weighed it at 906 kilograms. Bugatti Veyron Super Sport is something like 799. Aston Martin Valkyrie is 911 brake per tonne. So this has got so much more power to weight than all of those other things. It is mind-boggling. There is some aero, of course. It's making at its top speed, but it has got a mega top speed. It's like 1,500 kilos of downforce at its top speed. It gets a bit active at the back where the diffuser can be stalled or not, and there is a large wing which goes up and down. You can control it yourself, but honestly, I'd leave it to it, frankly. Tyres are Pirelli P0 Trofeo R's. They're the only option. They're 20-inch wheels on the front, 21s on the back. There's no like winter tyre or other funky car option. This is a car I suspect that you would drive only when the conditions really suit it. Fortunately, the conditions do suit it today. Now, Autocar's road test of the Evija is out now, as it's published today, the same day we're publishing this video, but I will let you into a tiny little secret, is that we are one of the very few magazines, media outlets, that still use industry standard test tracks in the UK. There are a couple of them, we use them both at times, but what those places don't like, because they have so many top secret cars running around, is journalists turning up with photographers and videographers and cameras. So while we record the numbers there and do all the wet weather testing, dry weather, track testing, what we can't easily do is film ourselves doing it. So I've come to Lotus's test track. to find out exactly what it feels like to accelerate from 0 to 200 miles an hour within a standing kilometre. Yes, I did say 200 miles an hour in less than a kilometre. So let me show you with some numbers just how fast this car accelerates. So the thing about the acceleration of this car is actually if you look at the 0 to 60 and the 0 to 100 mile an hour times, they're not necessarily the quickest we have timed. EVs quite often get going early and run out of puff. The Lotus doesn't do that. One, there's only so much oomph you can put to the road from rest. We're still talking an extremely fast car from 0 to 60, right? Still under 3 seconds, comfortably under 3 seconds, 0 to 60, consistently under 3 seconds, 0 to 62. But what happens is that some EVs just sort of run out of urge as they get a bit quicker. I think these motors are quite sort of long-geared, if you like. So it keeps going, and then it keeps going, and then it keeps going. A Bugatti Veyron would get up to, I think, about 180-ish miles an hour with a standing kilometre. I'll put it on the graphics because I can't remember off the top of my head exactly, but pretty quickly. This car reaches its top speed within a standing kilometre, and no other car that we've tested has ever got close to that. We've only tested 3 cars at over 200 miles an hour as part of our road test, just because the UK isn't big enough to do it. No car has done it in the space that this car can do it. Within a standing kilometre, to get to 217 miles an hour is mind-boggling, especially when you consider that it's pretty quick to 60. Let's see exactly what it feels like as that speed keeps going and going and going. I'll just give it full throttle, shall I? I'm on the brake. What's the worst that could happen? Oh, Jesus. 60. 100. 150. 160. 70. 80. 90. That's the thing about it, is that as you go, I seem to be calling then. I'm pretty sure I seem to be calling like 60, 100, 150. 150 comes up just as quickly as it goes from 60 to 100. This car is allowed to accelerate more the faster it goes, and then kind of the more aero it makes, so the more stable it becomes. Because it makes so much noise as well, I don't think it's such a sensory deprivation as some EVs. You accelerate hard in some EVs and you go, oh, this is weird, I don't like this at all. But because this is really loud, it does give you an indication as to how fast you're going. Very fast is the answer. But do you know what I mean? It's like, I remember talking to one of Jaguar's Formula E racing drivers some time ago, and he said it's weird. It's like driving, because you don't get any of the cues of the gear shifts. It is like a sensory deprivation driving experience. This is not in any sense, I don't feel like that. So acceleration is one thing, of course, but it's not the whole story, especially when you've got a number of £2 million hypercars to sell. It has to do more than that. It has to give people a reason to want to use one. So outside it looks the way it does, which I think, with some of those swoops through the bodywork and the little ducts and things like that, I think it's sensational. This interior is also gorgeous. It's very, very raw, all right? It's very open carbon fibre. It's actually quite airy because of this spar across the front, which reminds me of, I think there was a Lotus, maybe it's a 211, 311 that did something similar, just had one spar. 340R, I think, actually had a spar like this across the front, both designed by Russell Carr, Lotus's chief designer, and it's beautiful. This carbon's finished really lovely. It's swoopy. It's not unlike a McLaren P1 in that sense, or a Ferrari F80 has similar exposed carbon, but it's not quite as swoopily designed as this. But as EVs go, it doesn't have a massive range. It does no regeneration through the motors under braking. All of the braking is done through the carbon ceramic discs. That does mean that they don't have to worry about melding brake feel from one to the other. You just get a very natural, honest feedback of braking feel, and it retains hydraulic power assisted steering. Not many car companies do that anymore. Basically this and McLaren, as far as I can tell. That means that it's medium heavily weighted steering. You get a very honest feel, even under heavy braking. It's weird to talk about steering feel under braking, but with an electrically assisted rack, manufacturers would still want to retain some kind of their normal weighting under braking. The harder you brake, the harder it gets to turn, because the wheels don't really want to turn because they've got all the load on them. So from that point of view, it's a very honest feeling car. Likewise, the suspension, the damping is slightly adjustable as you move through the drive modes, which start off in range, go through to city, go through to tour, go through to sport, then go to track, which you have to remove the rear number plate for because it's just too much for the road. It's just too bonkers for the road. As you go through the modes, you get allowed a bit more power. You actually get all of the power, I think, from sport onwards, but the thing that even in sport, it doesn't put all the power to the front motors straight away because you get too much torque stick. In track, it just lets you do all that, but that's just too wild for the road, so they make sure you've got to take the rear number plate off before you can activate that mode. Clever stuff. But as the dampers, even in slightly firmer mode, what Lotus does is it allows, I forget what exactly the phrase they call it, but basically at the top of the damper travel and the spring travel, some manufacturers make the springs and dampers quite hard to resist pitch and roll and dive. What that also means is that as you just go along a normal road, the suspension's quite jittery, quite jumpy, because you're only ever in that top bit of travel anyway. What Lotus does is it allows a bit more movement in the early stages of suspension travel. That means that the ride, and you'll have heard and read and maybe even felt if you've been in a Lotus, the ride quality is usually exceptional, like really, really good. And that's because they allow a bit more movement early in the damping. And that means that, yes, if you bring it to a circuit, sometimes it will pitch and roll a little bit more than some other sports cars. But honestly, I don't mind that. It means it rides curbs really well. And actually, once you get into the meat of the damping, once you've got the suspension loaded up, control is really, really good. And actually having a little bit of dive and roll to lean against is no bad thing. And as we know, when Lotuses start to move around properly, they still control their body movements really well. And it comes down normally into how they tune even things like the engine mounts. Of course, the Evija does not have engine mounts, but it does have its large drive battery mounted pretty much where an engine in a mid-engine car would normally be. So this feels very much like a mid-engined Lotus. You give it a bit too much and lift off, it tucks the nose in. It turns around its middle, gives terrific steering feedback as it does it. But then it just has this trick that no other Lotus, in fact, very few other cars in the world have, where as you come out of a corner and pin it, it is brutally, uncomfortably fast. I did give it full throttle, but I didn't come out of that corner at particular flat chat, and I didn't stay on the throttle for all that long, and it did 150 miles an hour. Just like that. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about this car is it drives like a Lotus. It feels like a Lotus. It doesn't feel as heavy as it is. It feels heavier than most Lotuses, but the ride breathes, the steering torques. It's a very natural analog driving experience. And I'll be honest, I did not necessarily expect to find it would be quite so talkative and approachable and Lotusy as it is. God, it just feels so special. It feels so cool. It feels such a wonderful thing. The full Autocar road test is available to you if you go to autocar.co.uk. It's in the magazine, which has been publishing road tests for 100 years or thereabouts. It's been publishing in total for 130 years exactly this year, which makes it the oldest surviving media outlet in the automotive sphere. As such is the way of the modern media world. We're here on YouTube, we're over at all of the socials, we are online at autocar.co.uk. We have a podcast which I commend to you, and you can interact in ways that you have never been able to before, and the one I'd really love it if you would do now is like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, letting us tell you the story of this extraordinary car, and I'll see you next time.